Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Reviewing Comics with me, your host, Alexander Turbin. This week we're doing something a little different. It's called How to Draw Comics comic from 1985, and it's made from Solson Publications. But before we get into that, let me show you some of the stuff that I work on. And if you would like to help support the channel, you could check out some of my comics. I do a comic called Random Access that I give to my patrons on Patreon. And you can check those out at Patreon /AlexanderTurbin.com. And you can also check them out at AlexanderTurbin.com. I have all kinds of my different artwork and comics and stuff. And like I said, it's a 12-page, full size, full color, for the most part, comic book. You can also contact me at AlexTurbin04401 at Instagram.com. And if you like this kind of content, please consider subscribing and hitting the notification bell and chiming in with your thoughts on some of the comics that I've gone over. I've also would like to get comments on what other comics you'd like me to review. I've got lots of different ones, but I might have one that you think you would like to see reviewed. So anyway, 1985 How to Draw Comics comic. I bought this. I want to say I bought this after it had come out in probably like the late 80s, 80, 88, 89, 90, probably in a back issue. Or actually, I probably got this in like a quarter bin or something like that. But it's pretty interesting because it's John Byrne and John Romita Sr., with a script of Alan Freeberg, lettering by Peter Hwichmeimer, and editor Stephen Brodowski. This is the same company that gave you Reagan's Raiders and the Samurai Funnies and some of those other stuff. So it's kind of interesting that they decided to go into print something else. I don't understand why they were allowed to use Marvel characters. They used the X-Men here. And they're actually, well, I guess it's just an advertisement for something, so they get away with it that. But they also later on have a picture of Wolverine, so, and it does say Marvel Comics Group on it. So that's the only Marvel thing, I believe. Maybe there's another couple things in here. Well, they do have Marvel trademarks all over, even though that's not necessarily the Blob. I mean, it looks like him, but or the Hulk. But I guess they didn't want to take any liberties and piss Marvel off. And I think Marvel just kind of knew what they were doing and didn't want to interfere with what John and John were doing. That's just a guess, though. But that would make sense that two of their biggest creators were doing something a little different. And I don't think Marvel wanted to piss them off over something like how to make a comic book. So it's pretty standard stuff. I mean, it deviates from how to make the Marvel comics the Marvel way, and I don't have a copy of that right now, and actually I've never owned a copy. I've read it. I think every comics fan has read it, but I think this goes into a little bit more detail and has a little more nuance than that does. But I'm in favor of any kind of comic book or magazine or whatever that shows how to make comics. I mean, I love Scott McCloud's books. I love all of the how to make comics literature that you can find out there. There's no possible way that you could overextend this this field, this what to do, how to make comics, because even to this day, I've been making comics since I was 15 and I'm 52 now, and I still to this day come across instances when I'm making a comic that I'm baffled as to how to do it, and I have to work through it, whether that's an illustration or a panel layout or whatever it is. It's just it's a terrifically nuanced art form, and anything that brings to light a better way to do it is fantastic for me. And the fact that this is John Byrne, who I am not a huge John Byrne fan, but I mean, he drew two of my favorite storylines of all time in the Dark Phoenix, Days of Future Past series in the X-Men. So how could I not love it? So I do love John Byrne. I'm just not as fanatic about him as a lot of other people were or are. I don't know if they still are. So this is in '85, and it goes through all of the different tools and stuff that you're going to need at that time. They don't have computers, they don't have tablets and stuff like that, which that would be an interesting how to make comics using an art tablet. I bet they have that, but drawing board. But then they go into figures, and like I said, you've probably seen this in other places. I've actually seen this. We have a music store that uses on their bags this whole picture. So that's kind of interesting. I assume this is Romita Senior that's doing this. Um, I think I've seen John Byrne's same rendition of this, but I'm pretty sure that this is Romita Senior doing the artwork for this. I'm not really going to go into the writing because it's basic standard tutorial fare. It has a little bit of personality to it, but it's almost like they're kind of trying to mimic Stan Lee, but I'm not really interested in what the writer has to say. I'm interested what the artist has to say. I really find it interesting that they have a writer at all. Like it should just be John Byrne and John Romita talking about making comics and what they do. And that's probably what happened. I can only imagine that the writer went to each of these artists and maybe had a notepad and a pen and it was like, so John's, what do you do here? How do you do this? I can only assume I mean, a writer, even if they're a slightly accomplished artist, I don't think that they would want to step on the toes of two of the great comic book artists of all time. So they just kind of go through different superheroic stances and musculature, and stuff like that. So I think it takes parts of how to make comics the Marvel way, and maybe expands on some of the stuff. It doesn't break down the how to use the tubes and the squares and triangles and circles to create the structure of the person. So that's kind of unusual. Hey, look, She-Hulk with nipples. So they're talking about women and the basic differences between drawing men and women, and so that's kind of interesting. I mean, they do have the basic skeleture, and they talk about starting off with stick figures here, and then moving on to the different things, and then using this. I don't believe they talk about the S curve or anything like that. Maybe they do here, but it's interesting how they expand a little bit on the original Marvel, how to draw comics the Marvel way. And here you see a bunch of John Byrne drawings, and I guess that's the biggest thing on looking at this book is you get to see some of the intricacies of what John Byrne, how he goes about drawing some of his stuff. I kind of wish he would show a little bit more of the breakdowns. Here they really go into what they have in the Marvel comics, how to make comics the Marvel way, where you want to make things more dynamic. And I'm a big proponent of that in my comics, which unfortunately sometimes that makes my figures look a little silly. But I'd rather have silly looking figures than boring figures. But they have like A and B here. Pretend this is Professor Xavier. Is he going to sit like this all the time? Is he ever going to sit like that? So it may be more dynamic, but it's not conducive to what is the character. And here's some other dynamic poses that they say could make your drawings a little bit better on figures, because this whole thing is about figures and anatomy. Not so much anatomy, but just figures and proportions and stuff like that. So it really goes through a little bit more in depth in stuff. And like I said, it has some great illustrations by John Byrne, kind of just showing his technique and how he starts off with a figure and stuff. And that's really cool. And here's some John Romita's figure work, which is really interesting too. And just like they're showing uh, how to be dynamic and also how to show the action, the figure in action, which is really, you would want this broken down more a little bit, I think. Uh, I think this is a little more advanced than uh, just starting in your comic. So I think they're kind of assuming that people have already done a few things and read a few things and drawn a few things, and that they're now at this level of trying to do some of the stuff that John Byrne has done. Storytelling, this is interesting. In this whole comic, they don't really go into huge detail on a lot of stuff because they're relegated to only having, what, 37 pages. And I mean, you could fill up, I mean, how is Understanding Comics? That's, you know, that's a huge tome of books and stuff. And that doesn't even get into all of this stuff. That gets into, you know, all of this different quantitative stuff, unquantitative. Um, this makes no sense. You can't really understand what's going on in each panel, each page. I guess this is basically what they're saying is give a script to 20 different artists, and you're going to get 20 different ways of looking at the script. And I think that this is just 6 different artists' renditions of a script. And they're right. I mean, you get completely different things unless your writer is completely tight in his writing, like maybe Alan Moore. But even then, you still have way different perspectives. Everybody has different perspectives in how they want to tell a story, and I think that's great. But they do break down a few things of do's and don'ts, and how to do things better. Like, don't show only part of the they're saying this is an establishing panel, and don't only show half of his body or the other half. Show the middle, and that's really the establishing panel, which I kind of agree with. I do remember this panel very specifically when I was younger and drawing started to draw, where you don't want to have a figure with his one of his arms off panel, because it doesn't really make sense. Like, why would you do that? It kind of ruins everything. And here's some of the perspective and stuff like that. And they go and talk about some of the different things, and like, you want her looking up at him, and the next panel is she's looking that way. They're saying she wants her to look that way, to keep the story in the flow. And here's more perspective stuff. Yeah, so it's all good stuff. I mean, none of this stuff is wrong. Some of the stuff is a little taste wise. Like, they have an example of Duperman, who is their character that they have, in the book, or of what they're doing. And he's leaning against the panel, and they're saying that's a no-no, because the panel is it's in the camera frame, and it's not part of his reality. It's part of what we're looking through, not what he knows. And here's a part where they go into the editing, where they have one panel, he's opening the door to the right, and this, he's opening it to the left. And that's just editing. If you're an artist and you do that, everybody does it. Everybody has that, and everybody will do it. And it's just a matter of catching it and whether or not you think it's worth changing. And so here they show some more panels of action scenes and what's going on. This must be the John Romita stuff. You can really tell the Romita stuff from the Byrne stuff. It's a little bit more linear, I think, the Romita stuff, and the Byrne stuff is a little more organic. That's how I see it anyway. If you guys think of it a different way, you should let me know and see, and we can talk about it. But here's another perspective, angle, and technique, and they don't really go into this very much. A lot of this stuff they just kind of gloss over, and they just mention it. And I mean, a lot of people do this. I'm never going to do it. Maybe some of my maybe some of my stuff looks a little messed up. My perspective looks a little messed up, but I just can't fathom spending uh, 1,000 hours on a comic. Um, I understand that you should put all of your effort into the comic and all of your energy and your best work into it, and you shouldn't ever say, "Well, that's good enough." But at the same time, it's a comic that you have to produce, and it's a story, and you want to go to the next story. You want to get your work out there. You want to get it done. If you are a perfectionist and you just want to have everything perfect and nothing is ever good enough, then you're never going to finish the story. You're never going to let anyone ever see your work. You need to eventually say, that's good enough. I want to get on to the next story. And for me personally, I have a million stories in me. And as much as I would like every panel to be exactly perfect and have a trillion lines and be detailed and everything, eventually you have to say, this is what I'm going to do. It's done. I'm going to go on to the next story because I have to. And that's the difference between an illustrator and or a cover artist versus a comic book penciler or a comic book creator. Is you're at the mercy of the story. They're not at the mercy of having one page be connected to the next page. They are just working on that one image, that one static image, so they can put it all on there. They can, go have all kinds of different ways of looking at that one image, have thumbnails and do different drawings of it, and then they come up with the best thing. And they're putting all that effort into that one illustration. But when you're penciling the comic or just creating the comic, you gotta move on. And it's a completely different art form, doing an illustration than doing a comic book. I think most people know that, but a lot of people don't appreciate it. Anyway, so it goes on to faces and heads and stuff, and it's really talking about getting to the roots of everything. If you're gonna make faces, you gotta understand the skull. If you're gonna make the body, you gotta understand the bones and the muscles and stuff like that. And I think that's pretty true. Yeah, I think that's pretty true. You have to know what skulls look like in order to make faces. Um, you don't really need as much detail as they get into here. They're talking about how they build up skulls and from Neanderthals, and you put skin on them and stuff like that. It's interesting, but it's not really necessary. You do want to have a good grasp of different types of people, ethnicities, races, sexes, different types of faces, the hook nose or the hawk nose, which is what I use probably a little too often, or the little beaded nose. But they show it off, and then they show some technology and stuff. I think a lot of this is just them wanting to show off John Byrne and John Romita's artwork and how they kind of get to where they are from the very beginning. It doesn't really show the different times or ways they get to it, which I kind of wish they did. But it does a pretty good job. Did a pretty good job. I really love John Byrne's technology stuff. It's really organic, like I said. It's completely different than Romita or Kirby, which is a little more fluid and linear. So yeah, the John Byrne sketchbook. That would be pretty cool to have. But yeah, How to Draw Comics comic from 1985, and featuring John Byrne and John Romita. And yeah, it's a nice little book. I can't really give it like a 9 or 8 or 9 or anything like that. I'm gonna give it a 7 because there's a lot of things that It doesn't go into that. I wish it did. I wish it had, a few of these pages were just interviews with the artists, and maybe get their complete perspective on what they're doing and how they're doing it. Um, yeah, I would give it a 7. Um, but it's a cool little read and definitely worth getting. Thanks for watching, and if you like this kind of content, please consider subscribing and commenting and hitting the notification bell and all that cool stuff. And I will talk to you next time. Thanks a lot for watching.